Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call tonight's meeting to order. The February 15th, 2018 Santa Barbara Board of Harbor Commissioners can come to order. Ms. Prudzinski, would you call roll, please?
Yes, Bill Spicer.
Here.
Betsy Kramer. Here. Merritt McCrae.
Here.
Lang Sly.
Here.
John Stedman.
Here.
Shoham Yaniv.
Here.
Jim Sloan is absent tonight.
Okay. Mr. Reedman, any changes to the agenda tonight?
Chair Spicer, no changes tonight. Thank you.
Excellent. This is the public comment section. Mr. Friedman, would you like to address us?
All right. Good evening, Chair Spicer and fellow Harbor Commissioners. My name is Eric Friedman. I'm on the City Council, just recently elected, and have been appointed to be the liaison from the Council to the Harbor Commission. And for some of my background, I was a former Harbor Commissioner with Bill and Betsy, and I look forward to working with you and being the Council Rep Liaison. And just real quick, today at the Council, we had a special budget session, just kind of looking ahead of where we're going, and we're in the second year of a 2-year budget, and pretty much things are going to be status quo going for the next fiscal year. So things will be looking pretty good. And but at this point, I just want to introduce myself and look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And as you know, you're welcome anytime. Appreciate it. Moving to consent calendar, approval of the minutes. Is there a motion?
I'd like to say what a really good job you did, Jeanette. A complicated meeting last meeting, and we appreciate the work that you did.
I think we all would echo that. So we've got a first and a second. Is there all in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions? Very good. Any noes? All right. Harbor Commission matters and appointment of our new commissioners. Mr. Reedman.
Yes, Chair Spicer, Commissioners. Tonight we are going to reseat Commissioner Lang Sly. He was reappointed by the City Council for a 4-year term ending on December 31st, 2021. Sounds like an awfully long time away in the future, but Commissioner Sly also serves on the Budget Committee as well. And tonight we're also seating for the first time Commissioner John Stedman, and he was also appointed by Council in December and for a 4-year term ending in December 2021. Commissioner Stedman served 10 years in the Navy as a surface warfare officer aboard a guided missile destroyer and amphibious assault ship with a specialty in tactical air intercept control. He also sailed and competed on U.S. Navy single-handed sailing team and enjoys sailing small craft quite a bit. So he's currently a member of the Santa Cruz Yacht Club, but from our discussions at the orientation, I believe he's going to transfer that membership to the Santa Barbara Yacht Club. He's qualified as a U.S. sailing certified small boat instructor at California Maritime Academy and a former coach and instructor at Harvard College Sailing. I'm also a board member of the National Multiple Sclerosis Society and a management consultant practicing analytics and business intelligence, and also involved in various community volunteer roles throughout his professional career. And then, join me and staff in welcoming Mr. Commissioner Stedman aboard. And just to append to that, we'll be doing election of chair and vice chair and appointments to the subcommittees in July, as usual. So I think that sums up the Harbor Commission business for the evening.
Great. Well, welcome. Would you like to address the council? Anything you'd like to say?
I'd like to test this out for the first time, actually. Can everyone hear me? Thank you very much, Scott, Director Reedman. It's a real pleasure and honor to be appointed to this commission, and I hope to serve everyone well. I've had excellent debriefings by the waterfront staff, quite impressive. So hopefully that sets the tone for the next 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you, and again, welcome. Moving to our director's report. Mr. Reedman, again.
Okay. As Councilmember Friedman referred to, this afternoon we had a budget work session. I just put it in this packet, so if anybody wanted to go today, they could, but we didn't have any members of the public there. It was down at the Chase Palm Park Center and just went through a lengthy PowerPoint on enterprise funds, general fund, just a lot of budget trends, where the revenue comes from and where it goes for the enterprise funds as well as the general fund. And so that was entertaining and informative. 90-slide PowerPoint. Took a little while to get through, but it was good in the end. Also, staff and I met with, the managers and I met with Robert Burke, and he attends many city council meetings, frequently offering, I could only put it this way, whimsical musings and sometimes serious commentary during the public comment period at many council meetings. Mr. Burke has recently accessed CityWorks, which is a newly developed program for TV Santa Barbara. So his purpose with this is to present how the city of Santa Barbara works department by department and try and get this out to the people for a better understanding of how each department works. And the city administrator, Paul Casey, gave him permission to do this, interview staff and so forth. So we had an orientation with Mr. Burke about a week ago, and he would like to complete the show by the end of summer or early fall. That might be a little aggressive of a schedule given the number of departments and so forth. But we'll probably, a next step, he contacted me again today and he wants to move forward. So the next step will probably be a Harbor Patrol boat ride with his cameraman so they can get some nice visuals around the harbor. And that's really what his interest is, because the harbor has a lot of visual opportunities and it'll make the show much more interesting than, say, interview at the city attorney's office or something. So anyway, we'll be working on that, and tentative items for the March meeting will be the budget recommendation for FY19, and that concludes my report unless there are any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Reedman. Any questions? Okay, thank you, Scott. Moving on to facilities, Mr. Treiberg.
Good evening, Chair Spicer and Commissioners. Tonight I have a brief report on the city pier hoists. Next slide, Brian. There are 4 hoists on the city pier. I think every working harbor has hoists to help with commercial fishing and everything else, but I think they're neglected and taken for granted at just how important they really are. Next slide. Hoists 1 and 2 are, there's 4 hoists located on the city pier. There's 3 tripod frames and 1 stiff leg hoist, what we call a stiff leg hoist. They're used by commercial fishermen, boat maintenance companies, and private boaters. Hoists 1 and 2 are heavily used by commercial fishing fleet. Any evening, even right now, they're probably offloading urchins or some sort of fish. And we have routine inspections, daily, weekly, and annual recertification. These are required to be certified by Cal OSHA every year. Hoists 1 and 2, they're set on a tripod frame. They both look alike. They're at the western end of the city pier on the south side, and they really are the workhorses out there. They're small cable-driven motors, electric. Next slide, Brian. They have a 1,000-pound lifting capacity. They're pretty old. They must be 20 or 30 years old, so we're scheduled to replace these as part of our fiscal year 2019 capital improvement program. It's about, we have $150,000 budgeted, not quite sure how much it's going to cost and just exactly what we're going to replace them with. But it's essential that they get replaced quickly and seamlessly because they really do get a lot of use. And all of these are coin operated. These particular hoists cost $6 an hour, a quarter at a time, 10 minutes at a time, whatever you want. Hoist 3 is a little bit bigger, a little stronger, and it's in pretty bad shape. As you can see, all the rust on the motor itself and the backing plate. Next slide, Brian. This particular hoist can lift 2,000 pounds. We've got a new hoist motor ready for installation that we purchased for $18,000 and just did an engineering analysis and design to remount it. We're going to do that, but we may refurbish the tripod base prior to installation of a new motor because it's not scheduled for a capital improvement program in the near future. We should be able to get that done pretty quickly, and as we rotate hoists 1 and 2 out for new hoists, this one would be back up in service and reliable. It's a little more expensive, $7 an hour for those who are interested. Our biggest hoist, most complicated hoist, and most difficult to maintain hoist is what we call the stiff leg hoist out by the ice house. That's the ice house in the background, and the lower little tent covered thing is a recycled oil depository. This particular hoist can lift 4,500 pounds. It can when it's in service. It's currently not in service. We just installed a new hoist and trolley motor for $29,000. We've had some serious problems with limiter switches on this. So anytime you have a large hoist on a wooden pier, you have to limit the lifting capacity because you don't have a concrete base like you normally have. So there's a lot of liability associated with lifting more than it's not so much what the hoist can lift or what the stiff leg the column can handle, it's what the deck can handle. So we're getting a new limiter switch next week, and we'll put it back into service. It's used to lift, it can lift 6,000 pounds, and it has lifted 6,000 pounds, but for some modifications made to the deck itself several years ago. It was downrated to 4,500 pounds, but it doesn't really serve the needs of the boaters that we have and the commercial fishermen. So we met with the public works engineer today, and next week we're going to go out there and make a couple more improvements to the underside of the deck, and we're going to try and increase that rating to 5,000 pounds, and that'll help lift things like engines out of commercial fishing fleets, commercial fishing boats, some of the larger sailboats. Once it's done, it's been out of service for quite some time. I think it's going to be a nice amenity, and we'll get a lot of use again. It's a little more expensive at $12 an hour, and folks, research vessels and others can actually reserve that side of the wharf. So we get a lot of larger vessels in there and do some more commercial-oriented kind of stuff. So just for people to know, that's when you want to do a big project, they can go up to the front counter and reserve that area and get their project done with a hoist that can meet their needs. You've seen a lot of work out there. It's been out of service for a long time. As I mentioned, it's difficult to replace these kind of things. It looks simple, but it's a little more complicated. Nevertheless, we're going to have all these hoists up and running and in good shape this year and meet the needs of the boating public. And that concludes my report this evening.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Carl. Any questions? Sure. Microphone, sir.
Are these hoists all run by quarters now, or does a person have to run up to the harbor office to purchase tokens?
Chair Spicer, I believe, and Commissioner McCray, I believe they all work on quarters. The tokens was problematic, so it's all quarters.
Thank you.
I had a question or two. Following that, I don't want to create a solution for something that doesn't exist, but is there any thought of going to similar to our Luke system where it's pay to use and not necessarily quarters or tokens for these?
Chair Spicer, not at this time. At a quarter a pop, most of the guys are spending 50 cents, 75 cents to offload their cargo.
Okay.
We have bigger problems than that.
Than that, okay.
Once we get them up and running reliably, then we can look at a different pay system.
We can assess that. Well, then I guess my second question would be: is what we're charging, is that a token amount, or is that helping offset the cost of what we're going through?
I'd say it's just a token amount, so
Okay.
that people just don't go up there and make them go up and down and break them.
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, here we go.
I have a question. What about the hoist on the pier? Is that also
That was on my
going to be, how's that looking as well?
Chair Spicer, Commissioner Yaniv, I think you're referring to the hoist on the Travel Lift Pier.
Yeah.
And that is owned and operated by the Yacht Club.
Okay.
So they're responsible entirely for it, and they do a pretty good job of keeping it up and running, especially with the upcoming Wet Wednesday season. It'll be essential that it's ready to go, I think, the first Wednesday after daylight savings changes.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Harbor Operations, Mr. Cronman.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. On January 23rd, and near the tail end of all the other catastrophic events we were dealing with in our local area, there was a significant earthquake south southwest of Kodiak Island in Alaska, nearly an 8.0. It was a 7.9. And all of those of us who are involved in emergency response and are tied into the Emergency Operations Center in one way or another, our phones were ringing and buzzing and alerting and what have you. And when I got the message, it was actually a tsunami warning. Didn't last long, the warning level, but it was a tsunami warning, and it looked like there was going to be a tsunami tidal surge all the way down to Peru. And so we did what we typically do as step one of our emergency response plan. And that, after a bunch of notifications, the waterfront director, dispatch, the emergency manager, the emergency response manager at fire, et cetera. And so then what we did was we basically went into step one of our emergency response plan, which is to notify Harbor Patrol, make all these other notifications, get everybody in gear, get the bait barge secured to the north side of the city pier, get the dredge pipes double wrapped up and tied. These are lessons we learned from the March 2011 tsunami following the Fukushima earthquake in Japan. So this is part of our contemporary tsunami response plan. Meanwhile, the tsunami warning was being downgraded to a watch, which is actually the lowest level. Over the years, they've changed it. It's watch, advisory, and warning. So they downgraded it to a watch, so we didn't go into step two. But I thought this would be a good opportunity to remind the public and the commission how it goes, what step two would have been had it remained an advisory or a warning. First, people in the city's established tsunami zones, as well as folks in the nearby areas, would have been contacted either via our reverse 911 system or through Blackboard Connect, our internet-based messaging system, most likely reverse 911 and maybe Blackboard Connect to backfill if we had to. And then they would be encouraged to exit the area and find high ground, at least 100 feet above sea level. That's usually the quickest in our area right around the harbor is to get up the City College steps to the West Campus. And depending on the nature, what the predictions are for the tsunami, find high ground, stay on high ground, and not come back down to the harbor. The worst thing you can do, as we used to do as kids, is come down to the beach to quote-unquote watch the tsunami. And as we've seen in several years, especially in the Western Pacific, that can be an absolutely disastrous thing to do. So besides that, for people who own boats in the harbor, they're really encouraged not to come down to their boat. Leaving their boat where there is and staying at high ground is really the best choice. But if they're worried about the boat and they insist on coming down against what we think is sound advice, and they want to leave and get out of there before a tsunami tidal surge occurs, they need to be prepared, and this will be part of the messaging, they need to be prepared to stay at sea for somewhere between 1 and 3 days. Actually, it could be up to 3 days if this is a big tsunami. This was a problem in March of 11 because after the first tidal pulse, folks before it went to sea, and once the tidal pulse came, they thought everything's good, and they came back. And when the second pulse came, they got spun up at the harbor entrance. Some of them ended aground. We had a mess disentangling and what have you, because in reality, a tsunami acts like a sloshing bathtub. Okay, there's the first wave. It actually, if you can imagine, it's sloshing between continents. It actually does that. If you think of it that way. And so there's sometimes the second, third pulse, or the second or third tidal surge. And in this case, it was several feet at a time. In my office, I could see it go up and down 5-6 feet in a period of 10 minutes. It can be much more dangerous than the initial one. So provision up, be ready. If that's your plan to go to sea, get at least 2 miles offshore and stay in at least 100 feet of water. And keep a sound ear to the radio, and stand by to see how it unfolds before you plan on coming back. For liverboards, they pretty much have a choice between doing what I just described and sheltering in place, as you would, which is a term of art used for folks usually in land-based emergencies, in earthquakes, wildfires, what have you. So they can either shelter in place, but if they go to sea, as I just described, provision up, be prepared to stay there for up to 72 hours. And so finally, again, we were spared on January 23rd. It would have been a really terrible tragedy to have this hit on the heels of the fire and the mudslide. But actually, even though all the watches and warnings were canceled, we have a NOAA-sponsored tide gauge at the east end of the city pier out by the fuel dock that actually did register some activity, some tidal activity. And I want to show it to you here now. I have a baseline and I have that, and for comparative purposes, we can look at those, and it'll indicate to you exactly what this looks like on our tide gauge. So this is normal. This is like baseline, right? This was taken after the event on January. These are readings from after the event on January 29th. This was the January 23rd event I just spoke of. And if you see middle right there, that's only in inches, but there actually was a discernible change from the blue line. I should go back and show you that. I apologize. The blue line is predicted. The red line is actual. And so from the blue line predicted, you can see that there was actually a difference in the tide from what was predicted and what we would have expected, which is, even though we would never have noticed it around the harbor, we thought it was a really good test to go back and look at this, and my colleague Carl Dryberg helped me dig this information up, and I thank him very much for that. And I compare this is what it looked like after Fukushima. And this was the real deal. This is when the bait barge came loose and the dredge pipe came sailing down the channel, and boats were getting spun up at the harbor entrance trying to get back in. So we have baseline. We have baseline. This is what it looked like even when all watches and warnings were canceled, and this was Fukushima. So I thought, by comparison, you might appreciate that, because it really does make a difference. We pay very, very close attention to these watches and warnings. We act according to our design plan, and we pay very close attention to this tide gauge information to show us the magnitude of these pulses when a tsunami is at hand of any magnitude. And that concludes my report this evening. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Croman. Any questions? Well, I'm sure that the community at large is pleased to know that we are paying attention, and that your group pays attention to all of those so that we're prepared. So thank you. Moving to item 6 and new business. We have a, is that right? Am I in the right space?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Item 6, budget overview for fiscal year 2019. Recommendation that Harbor Commission A, receive a report on the status of the fiscal year 2019 waterfront operating and capital budget, and B, provide comments on the various components of the draft budget proposal.
Mr. Boston.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I'm just going to jump right into it. This year, we are in the middle of a 2-year budget cycle, as Councilmember Friedman said in his opening comments. So the goal here citywide is to not have a whole lot of changes. That's why we do a 2-year budget, so there's not a lot of changing after the first year. So what you're going to see here are some preliminary numbers. The numbers will change slightly, and they already have since I published this report, and I'll go over those with you. But it's a fluid situation all the way up until the end of June, but don't expect a whole lot of movement. There are little changes here and there. So as far as an outline, I'll quickly review the 2018 revenues and expenditures for year-to-date. That's a real quick summary of our meeting last month. Excuse me. I'll go over our proposed fiscal year 19 fee adjustments, our proposed revenue assumptions for fiscal year 19, our proposed expenditures for fiscal year 19, and then review the current council-approved capital program. Real quickly, year-to-date, this is through 12/31, so this is just a rehash of last month's presentation. Revenues at 12/31 were $8.15 million, and our revenue projection for this year comes in just shy of $15 million, which is about a 0.5% increase over what we had originally predicted. Our expenditures through 12/31/17 are a little over $7.8 million, and our expenditure projection, based on seasonally weighted, well, actually that was revenue. So our expenditure projection is just under $15 million, or 5% below what we actually put in the budget documents. Now, as far as proposed fee adjustments, staff met with the Waterfront Budget Committee on January 31st, and we talked about a number of things, all the things you're going to see tonight. We did talk about fee adjustments. A number of them were just in a conceptual manner, and I'll talk about those a little more. And there were the parking components. We talked about those conceptually, larger parking issues down at the harbor. We didn't get into dollars and cents, so this will be the first time that you'll see dollars and cents as far as the parking permits are concerned. And we're looking for your consideration as well as any issues you might have with those. So I'm going to start with our slip rental fee. We're proposing a 2% increase, and that's similar to the past 5 fiscal years. It's kind of something everyone expects, and it does tie into our Division of Boating and Waterways loan that's helped redo Marina One. Our slip permit transfer fee, similar to previous years, we're looking to increase that by $25 a foot for slips above 30 feet. Slips 30 feet and below have all been frozen at different amounts over the years, including designated commercial fishing slips. And our slip permittee parking permit. So this is what we call the blue permit. This is for slip permittees. One parking permit per slip gets a blue. Wow, this is confusing. Sorry, gets a blue parking permit. Okay, and what that does is that allows slip permittees to use the harbor main lot, and they can stay there much longer than 72 hours. There really is no time frame. You just have to have a vehicle that's operational, and we do test those. So currently, it's at $70, and we'd like to move that up to $125 this year. So to put that in perspective, currently it's at 19 cents a day, and that's based on a 12-month period, although the permit is actually valid for 13. So we move that from 19 cents a day up to 34 cents a day. Again, that's for the blue permit. Yes, and I should mention, thank you, the last increase for this permit was back in 2006. So we're looking at 13 fiscal years since it was last changed. Next is our public parking permit. Currently, that's at $100. It was last changed in 2015. It went from $95 to $100. And we're proposing to move that up to $125, similar to the blue parking permit or their slip permittee parking permit. So they would both be at $125. To put that in a daily average, we would be moving it from a little over a quarter a day to 34 cents a day. So not a bad deal. As far as visiting and transient vessel fees, we are proposing this year to charge vessels 70 feet and above, increase their per linear foot charge from $1 to $1.50. That's primarily based on the pull of electricity that they require as well as water. We're talking very large boats. We think this is more than fair. And lastly, our annual West Beach rack permit fee. These are the 6 racks out there that house 8 kayaks and canoes, and they're for the clubs primarily. And we would move that from $1,000 to $1,100. And we're on a program there where we're increasing it $100 until we get up to an appropriate level. So those would be the proposed fee adjustments for this year. And I should let you know, as far as our budget process is concerned, we're here with you today. I will be back next month, but in between now and then, on the 26th, we will be meeting with the city administrator and the finance director and his staff to go over our budget as well. Then again, we'll be back in March, and after that, we'll have visits to the finance committee, likely in May, and then we also have a council budget work session. I believe that's in May as well. So this is early on, lots of more presentations to go here. As far as revenue assumptions for fiscal year 19, our property management continues to post strong numbers, and we are proposing a 1.9% increase on our revenues, or I should say, increase on our revenues over fiscal year 18. We've had a good year thus far, and we don't see any reason why that wouldn't change in the next year. Our financial management, a big increase. Granted, not a huge amount of money, but what we're going from this year, we have budgeted, and we get these numbers for our finance department. This is investment income. Currently, it's at about $119,000, so it's almost a doubling. That's great. We'll take it. That's money really we don't have to work for. So almost a 100% increase. Our parking services, this is something that likely none of you have seen before, but we're predicting a downfall in that. And that is because all our lots are doing great. However, with the Cabrillo Pavilion renovation project, which started January 2nd, I believe, of this year, it's going to be an 18 to 24-month project. And if you've been down to that side of the city, you'll see that about half of the Cabrillo East lot and half of the Cabrillo West lot are now fenced off for construction staging to accommodate that project. So roughly we're cutting those revenue expectations in half. Thankfully, the Parks Department is continuing their summer programs there, so they'll still have the Junior Lifeguards program, which helps us, brings people down to park. They'll continue to have the Reef and Run program every Thursday night, June through September. The Santa Barbara Triathlon will also still be housed there for that weekend in late August. So the activity will still be there. It's just we're going to have fewer available public parking spaces. But after this project, we assume that's going to go back to where it normally is. As far as marina management, we're proposing a 4.6% revenue increase. We continue to see strong numbers throughout marina management, particularly our slip permit transfer fees have gone up, and we're raising that bar from $850,000 a year. We'd like to bump that up to $1 million per year. That seems to be where we've been headed the last few years. So overall, about a 2.7% increase. As far as our proposed expenditures, you'll notice one different number in here that probably stuck out on the packet you were provided. Again, these numbers have changed since then, and that's with our special projects and community promotions, and I'll get to that. But overall, we're expecting about a 5% increase in expenditures in fiscal year 19. That includes 3% increase in salaries and then a 6% increase in benefits, and those both have to do with existing labor agreements in the various represented employee groups of the waterfront department. Our allocated costs increased by approximately $14,000 or 1%. And our supplies and services will also increase about 1%. One of the reasons there is our Work Inc. contract goes up slightly due to the state-imposed minimum wage increases. And then as far as our special projects and community services, so in your packet you would have seen, I believe it was a 20% increase. And so we did some digging, and after we visited you last year in March and April and February and every other month with budget, sorry to bring that up again, we went and did our presentations to council and everything was fine, but along the same time period, the city was negotiating for a new contract with MTD. And out of that, somewhat related to that, the city council reprioritized their Measure A funds. And if you recall, that was passed in 2008, and that was for road repairs throughout the city and road improvements, transportation improvements. And so some of those funds in prior years were going to help with the waterfront shuttle run by MTD, and that goes along Cabrillo and an upstate street. We pay approximately 22% of that overall budget, and that's dictated by 22% of the route and time is spent along Cabrillo Boulevard. So council reprioritized that funding and took it away from the shuttle bus program and moved it over all into street repair and transportation improvements. Consequently, our portion of that program went up by $70,000. So we've actually already absorbed that $70,000 for fiscal year 18, and we'll begin absorbing that $70,000 next year in fiscal year 19. So it's really a small change, but in the information you had, and that's actually in our budget document, it's 20%, I believe, is what it came to. So again, we've already absorbed that, and we'll continue to work with our downtown parking folks and MTD regarding any changes to that. Our non-capitalized outlays, 2%. increase. Overall, as far as principal and interest, this is on our debt service. There's a considerable increase, 29%, and that's because we're moving from that 30-year program with the Division of Boating and Waterways loan, and we're moving that down to a 20-year program. So that's going to increase our principal and consequently our interest as well. But again, in the long run, as we mentioned with the Budget Committee, that's going to save us millions of dollars over the life of that loan. And then lastly, we don't see any changes with our appropriated reserves. And overall, again, 5% increase as far as expenditures are concerned. As far as our proposed fiscal year 2019 capital program, it's a little over $1 million. It includes our Stearns Wharf timber and pile replacement, which is an annual program, about $425,000. It's constantly upkeeping the wharf is a constant endeavor by Carl's crew. We also have the Marina Renovation Program, and that'll include continued replacement of dock fingers in Marina 4, as well as the replacement of the Marina 3 end tie. New project, or I should say there's hoists 1 and 2, that should say now, and you just heard a report from Carl on that. The Harborway Sidewalk. The idea is to construct a new sidewalk on the west side of the U.S. Coast Guard building. So finally pull people off of Harbor Way and move them closer to the building. Thankfully, there haven't been any significant issues out there, but we do want to pull people off that main road and get them up onto a sidewalk. And then our parking lot maintenance program, and that's going to focus on, I believe, the Garden Street parking lot and the Harbor 90-minute lots as well. So that's our capital program for fiscal year 19, and it's probably the first time in a long while that you haven't seen Marina 1 on there. So we're looking forward to the completion of that, and kudos to Carl and his staff on completing that. So that, again, a brief overview. I'll get into more detail as these numbers come into better focus next month with you all, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have or any guidance you might have for us.
Thank you, Mr. Bossy. Any questions? Commissioner Stedman.
Yes, Mr. Bossy. How many parking spots, what's the capacity of the main marina lot? 'Cause I did the math on your revenue figure, the new increase of 125, and so that's approximately 293 slip permittee blue decals are issued or are going to be sold?
No, actually, blue decals, we have blue permits. Last year we issued, or this year, 664. Because we have 1,143 slips in the harbor.
Okay.
So theoretically, it could be up to 1,143, but obviously, some people own more than one slip, and not everybody gets them. So, and you, as a slip permittee, you don't need to purchase a blue permit if you don't want to. You can purchase a red one, but currently you would purchase a blue one because it's $70 as opposed to $100. So in the main lot, bear with me 1 second. I do have those numbers. Harbor, 502 general spaces. So in all of our lots, we have about 2,700 overall.
I see. Thank you very much. Just trying to get an idea of what the revenue generating capacity is for parking.
Very good. Any commissioners?
I'm hesitant to bring up financial considerations about the recent disasters, given what so many people went through, but I'm aware of at least one restaurant closing downtown that the owners attributed directly to revenue loss. And I'm just wondering if you have any feedback as to whether any of the harbor tenants were unduly stressed by revenue loss over that period.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Sly, we have our December figures, and we will be getting our January figures, which might even be more significant, but we'll be getting those figures within about a week or so. But looking at the December figures, a number of our restaurants closed. Moby Dick closed for a while. on the wharf. Santa Barbara Shellfish, the Harbor Restaurant reported that they were very, very slow. Brophy's stayed open, but I went over there to look, and I think they were just serving at the bar. It was really slow over there by Brophy's standards. Beachside, or the Shoreline Beach Cafe also closed for a while just because of the ash fall during the Thomas fire. So our restaurant revenues were down about $50,000-$60,000 for December compared to December of last year. So it was a bit of a hit, but I think, unfortunately, we're looking at one of the driest years on record ever is what we're seeing right now. We've barely received any rainfall so far. There isn't anything on the horizon, and although we need the water, I think you'll see our parking programs and the restaurant percentage rent paying tenants catch up with this. So I think the tragedy obviously is the worst part of it, but I think economically, I think the waterfront will bounce back quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Kramer.
I don't really have a question. Well, I suppose I do, but I think the jump from $100 to $125 for the public permit is surprising, actually, and it's pretty significant in only several years. And I wonder what the justification for that is. We have talked about it off and on, and I know that you try very much not to raise these rates. And will you be also increasing the rate to the City College parking permit?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Kramer, as far as the City College permit, their permit that they buy from City College is we don't have any say over that. I do know, however, working with City College as part of their transportation alternatives group, trying to get people out of cars and free up parking spots, that they are limited by state law that's geared towards community colleges. I believe it's around $45, and so their hands are tied as far as jacking that particular permit up. On our end, as far as where did we come up with the number, what we've been trying to do over the years is really look at this and see. We feel, and we actually know, that $100 is an extremely low amount for an annual parking permit. This is prime location, very highly used, and for example, in working with our downtown parking, different types of people downtown versus different uses downtown versus the waterfront, they charge anywhere from $120 to $160 for their permit, and that's per month. And that's limited to a certain lot, a few certain lots. You get a permit for a lot, and you can park there just during the day. In looking at other cities and counties around us, I was doing some additional research today, and I do have some figures. As far as Carpinteria is concerned, they don't have a parking permit program. The nearest thing I could find was the state parks, which occupies part of their waterfront area, and those are $195 a year, and they're only good for the day. Santa Monica, I try to work my way down the coast here. Santa Monica, they have a day use program, which is about $155 per day. And again, $155 for the year. And it's only good during the day. So basically 7 o'clock to 5 o'clock, and then it's no good. The city of Huntington Beach, $150. Pismo Beach doesn't do a permit program. It's pay and display all year long, every day. Newport Beach, $166 for a day use permit, $166 annually. And then Laguna Beach, as one would expect, $300. We're not trying to get up anywhere close to that, but noting how it's a great deal. And this is not, I think, revenue generated. We estimate if we were to change it from 100 to 125 for the general public, it would be under $100,000. as far as revenue is concerned. So again, we try and bounce this off of different parking organizations, compare it with our downtown parking. You know, it's very routine that we have businesses coming down looking for, 20, 30, 100 parking permits to buy for their company. And they ask how much. We say $100. They say per month. And we have to say, no, that's per year. And they get a kick out of that, and they're happy to buy all those spaces. And that's generally something we don't like to do because that's not what these lots are set up for. It's for people coming to the beach or going on a jog or a bike ride or the arts and crafts show or to a restaurant or the lower downtown area. So we're trying to, as you were at the budget committee meeting, there's a whole lot going on with parking. It is a science, and there's a whole lot of different facets to it.
Yeah, I think I appreciate the fact that you've looked at the other marinas and other cities. What I think a distinction for Santa Barbara is that for people, I don't hate the verb for recreation becoming recreating. At the harbor, there's no free parking. There's no other way besides buying either a daily permit or the annual permit. There's no parking except down along Cabrillo Boulevard, of course. But that's going to be pretty full with what's happening at the East Beach Pavilion. So I just think it's expressing the concern about it increasing, and I don't think that the harbor parking lots can be equated with the downtown parking lots. I mean, those are shoppers or businesses and so forth, and so I just want to make that observation for what it's worth.
Thank you very much for your comments. Well, I appreciate that. And we do have 90-minute lots. There's,
Right.
Along Harbor Way. And then when you come into Harbor Way on the left and the right, we have those. Again, I think it's maybe 100 and some odd spaces. So there are those 90 minutes. But again, they're the ones everybody goes to first, obviously.
Right. Thank you, anyway.
Any other questions? Commissioner?
So in one case, you said you went from 2006 to 2018 without a permit cost increase. And I know staff doesn't do anything without a lot of thought, so I don't know what that thought was, but is your intent to change that to a more regular increase, which I think, people kind of expect CPI creeps up and costs creep up on everything you do. And so what would your plan be in the future?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Sly, that's a really good point. And it's something we've been looking into for a while. Obviously, the jump that we're taking there from the 70 to 125 is larger than we would have wanted in looking back at it. Obviously, with our slip fees going up 2% a year, roughly around the CPI, that's a nice program to get into. So I think what we would look to in the future is to continue in a more gradual approach to that. I think that, especially with our slip fees, it's proven acceptable to slip permittees. It's kind of just part of the process now, and they can come to terms with that. I think it's a matter of getting caught up to where we think we should be in fiscal year 19. And we looked at it and over the years, and if you were to equate that of going back to 2006 and increasing it every year, it would be about a 4.5% increase each of those years to get where it currently is. But we are by far one of, if not the lowest parking permits you can find in the coast of California.
Merritt?
So I notice here that the blue permits are actually the same cost as the regular permits now?
That is what we're proposing.
You're proposing. Will you do you expect to continue to have a distinction between the two so that those slip holders can be given priority into the lot when parking is impacted there?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner McCray, nobody receives priority into the lot. It's a first come, first serve, whether you have red, blue, or you don't have any permit and you're just coming in to pay for the day. So looking towards the future, we see that the current benefit of a blue permit and the fact that you can park your car there for the entire year, as long as it's operable, we think that's a huge benefit. And so our thoughts right now are that 125 would continue to go up. I'm not sure at what rate. We haven't come to a decision on that, but we think it would probably increase quicker than a general permit would because of those added benefits.
Okay. Sir?
I know that parking is one of the biggest problems in the harbor, and will there be a discussion in the future about trying to solve some of the big issues that, spaces and availability and peak times and things like that, and especially in regards to people coming, from other cities to go on their charter trips and things like that, and occupying spaces for people coming to the beach for the day use, and solutions in regards to that?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Yaniv, that is a lot of what the discussion was at our budget committee meeting. There are so many different angles on parking, and it's not just us. It's every downtown, every city has parking issues. It really is a science, and there's a million different things to look at. Obviously, we all know that we have a limited number of spaces in all of our lots. Those aren't going to multiply. And so what we're trying to look at are things like oversized vehicle parking and step vans that are occupying quite a bit of spaces down there, which are acting as people's essentially garages for folks who live aboard or have a slip permit. So we are continuing to look at how to best address our parking needs to give the public as much parking as possible in the coming years.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a simple one. Can you go back to your first slide real quick? Oh, okay, the second slide. No, the third one. The first one with numbers. No.
Table 1.
Please don't make me do this again.
The one that shows the total revenue and the total expenses. Okay, there will work. So we are going to spend more than we bring in by just a hair?
Mr. Chair, great eye for detail. In this particular year, yes, because we have the Marina One program. So last year we had a much more robust capital program. I believe it was over $3 million, approaching $4 million. And so part of that, we dipped into a little bit of reserves. I know it's been a long time, but we had to dip into a little bit of reserves to help fund that. So in this particular year, yes. Next year, it flips. And so we've got, I think, about $1 million more in revenue than we do in expenditures for fiscal year 19. That's what we're looking at.
Great, thank you. And obviously being within 0.5% of your projection is pretty impressive, so thank you. Oh, another question.
One small one. From a small amount of money, the shuttle, the 70,000 for that, is that going to keep going up every year? Do you have any idea? There's been a lot of discussion in the past about this and the sense that it's pretty unfair for the waterfront to be paying so much on this, given there's probably little benefit to the waterfront of it.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Kramer, I think it's going to settle out from here on out, at least for the coming years. We do have a new contract with MTD. Part of that was the old shuttles were 5-6 years beyond their normal lifespan, so they had to change and get a new type of shuttle. You might have seen those running around. They're not as whimsical as the old ones, but they had to upgrade those. And that's all included as part of this additional $70,000 in our current contract, and that, which overall the current contract is about $250,000 a year. So our hope is that, and as well as downtown parking, who pays the other 78% of this, is that this will remain steady for quite some time.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Nicely done, Brian. Thank you. Moving on to item 7. That looks like a Mr. Cronman.
Item
ahead,
7, Municipal Code Amendments, recommendation that Harbor Commission receive a report on conceptual amendments to Section 17.12 of the Santa Barbara Municipal Code and recommend adoption of those amendments to City Council.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, each year, for those of you who've been on the board for a while know this, the staff comes to you after reviewing Title 17 of the Municipal Code, which is the harbor, all things harbor, with any suggested amendments, deletions, additions, and what have you, where we need them to provide continued clear legal authority for our projects, programs, and operations. We've had a lot of these over the years, and we call it code maintenance because the more up-to-date the code is, the better we can do our job in every phase of it. Safety and security is one of the primary things we do down there, and having a code that reflects what we do and how we do it is always very, very helpful. So for boating and personal safety, tonight we're recommending that you advance a conceptual proposal to City Council that involves putting a speed limit in the Stearns Wharf Y of 5 nautical miles per hour. For those of you who haven't done the math, that's about 5.75 statute miles per hour, close to 6 miles an hour. So here's the area we're talking about, bounded by A, B, C, and D here. This is the Y. This is an area basically that is between the shoreward finger and the roadway of Stearns Wharf, drawing a line directly, an imaginary line directly from A to B would close that area in. That would be the area we're talking about tonight. The longitude and latitude points are part of this drawing, would be advanced as part of the recommendation to City Council. And we'll come back to it, but I wanted to let you note, first off, you see the dotted line going up the diagram? That's the trap line. That's the line that we install November 1st that attaches to the shoreward finger and attaches to a point on shore. The idea for a trap line was established many years ago so that boats that start drifting in southeasterly storms can actually snag their running gear, rudder, propeller, and what have you on that trap line before they hit Stearns Wharf. It's a safety measure for Stearns Wharf. I just want to mention it now because we'll come back to it briefly later. So Section 660 of the California Harbors and Navigation Code, which you have as an attachment to your staff report, provides the authority for cities to enact special use areas and speed zones. An example would be the permitted mooring area and East Beach anchorages, which were established as a single project in 2006. And I thought I'd show that to you here as, like I said, an example of how we've utilized the privileges established by Section 660 of the Harbors and Navigation Code to do local projects. The hatched areas, of course, are our anchorages. The one on the west, or where my cursor is the seasonal anchorage, the summer anchorage, if you will. Then there's the mooring area, is that blank part in the middle, and then to the east is the year-round anchorage, or as we typically refer to it as the winter anchorage. All of this, along with the 5-mile-an-hour speed limit in the harbor proper, was established in conjunction with and in a recognition of what's allowed under Section 660 of the Harbors and Navigation Code. But nonetheless, the speed limit in the Y has been remained unaddressed. Why? WHY is not technically in the harbor. You also see in your attachments to the staff report in Title 1704-010 in the definitions, the harbor starts with Stearns Wharf and moves west from there. So the Y is actually not captured in there. In fact, it's considered open ocean. And so what we could do is try to apply U.S. Coast Guard navigation rules for safe speed. Those apply. It's included as attachment 5 to your report. But as you see, it's long, it's involved, it's complicated, and quite frankly, we don't typically cite for federal violations. We typically cite for municipal and state ordinance violations. And additionally, in quite frankness, and I don't mean this out of no disrespect whatsoever, judges, if you look at attachment 5, judges have a difficult time determining exactly what the granular nature of those various things that are related to safe speed involve. It has to do with others in the area and facilities in the area and sea state and operational abilities and what have you. So we believe that it's a municipal ordinance, just like the ordinance we have regulating the speed in the harbor, would be the best way to go and would be the best way to make the Y a safer area for anybody who transits there. It's frequented by motorized skiffs, SUPs, kayaks, wharf divers. Our maintenance divers go there a lot. Santa Barbara City College's dive tech students use that area a lot for their training. And of course, we have some Onondaga participants have a water polo match, several matches there every year in the summertime. So there's a lot of traffic in there, and it's usually, slow traffic. It should be slow traffic, but we've got human-powered and motorized motor vessel traffic in there at the same time. And in addition, that's why I mentioned the trap line. We have the trap line deployed to catch drifting boats, and so having that trap line in there also speaks to moving slow and pro, as they say. So cautious boat travel in the Y. So in conclusion, like I say, we have a variety of boats transiting the Y, and especially in light of the 2017 high-speed boat accident we had there, we're recommending a maximum speed of 5 nautical miles per hour in the Y, as you saw it laid out in the diagram earlier. We would propose amending the Municipal Code Section 1712 to add a speed limit language. That's shown as draft in Attachment 7. I'll be working with the city attorney. They may have me word it a little differently or place it a little differently. That's why this is a conceptual recommendation tonight. And by way of timeline, we're here tonight in February. I would hope to get up to City Council's Ordinance Committee. That's a 3-member subcommittee of the council in March, if you will. And then hopefully get to the council in April or in the latest May to have this ordinance read and introduced and adopted in time for high boating season in the Santa Barbara area. So that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Cronman. Questions? Commissioner McCray?
Yes, Mr. Cronman. Have you considered perhaps limiting speed just along Stearns Wharf within 100 feet of Stearns Wharf? I noted today that the gap for the Y is actually just right at 200 feet. And in complying with Rule 6 for safe speed, I would consider anything more than 5 knots within 100 feet of that pier, of the Stearns Wharf, to be in violation of Rule 6.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner McCray, I think you're absolutely right. And so Rule 6 would apply there. There are also various rules relative to bathing areas, which are marked in the summertime by the swim buoys. It was our opinion that to try and lay all of that out, we might get cross-jurisdictional issues. We might have a conflict with existing laws and what have you. Staff believes that most of the areas you just described are already covered, and we could write tickets for somebody buzzing through the wharf, shoreward of the Y. We cite people all the time. Well, we either warn or cite people all the time for speed violations near the swim buoys and what have you, or going inside the swim buoys. So we did consider it, but we thought right now, and maybe it's a baby step, maybe it's an iterative process, we thought starting with a speed limit in the Y, especially given the history and what we've experienced there and the amount of traffic that does go right through that area, would be a good place to start.
Okay. Commissioner Kramer.
I think this is a really good idea, and I'm glad you're doing it, and it's a positive that comes from the unfortunate accident of last year. So thank you for it.
Mick, I have one question, barely related. Can you describe for me what is the trap line? Does it hang in the water, above the water, and how does it catch a boat?
It floats on the water. It's buoyed by float. It has buoy floats on it, and so it's on the surface. So if you were to drive across it, or if you were to, it's just below. Is it right on the surface? Isn't it, Carl? That's what I thought. It would typically snag your rudder, your propeller, or what have you. So that's the intention of the trap line. It's another good reason, speaking to Commissioner McCray's interest, that folks see that and typically slow down in that area anyway. But it's on the surface. It's not down
Okay.
below. very
So
far.
how do the boaters avoid that when they go in the Y currently?
What? They, excuse me, Commissioner Spicer. They can see it. You can go around it.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And it's also seasonal. Thank you, Brian. It's also seasonal.
Gotcha.
It's only there in the wintertime.
Okay. Thank you, thank you. So we've had, we've heard the recommendation. Are there any further comments, questions, or proposals? I would accept a recommendation if there is one. Yes, I'm sorry, that's what I'm...
Make a motion to recommend adoption of the amendments, City Council.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, we have a motion in front of us with a first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any noes? Passes. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Croman. Extension number 8. Jeanette, would you read that for us, please?
Yes, item 8, extension of office lease agreement with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Recommendation that Harbor Commission recommend City Council approve a 3-year extension to the existing 5-year lease agreement with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration for the office space located at 113 Harbor Way at a rent of $1,396.68 per month.
Mr. Bossi?
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, as it's commonly referred to, has maintained the presence in Santa Barbara Harbor for many years. In addition to their 2 vessels in the harbor, the Shearwater and the Shark Cat, they currently occupy 2 offices as well as storage space totaling 452 feet at 132 Harbor Way. These are their offices. This is the back alley here behind Brophy Brothers. NOAA contacted us, representatives of NOAA contacted us about a month ago and asked for an extension to their current 5-year lease, which expires in June of this year. No change. We're proposing no change to the existing term, or terms, I should say. The new term would be a 3-year extension to the existing 5-year lease. And again, we see how that plays out over the course of time and if they would like to continue to have those offices in the future. As you recall, back in 2013, they had a number of other offices. I believe they have 4 offices and another storage space, but they moved out to UCSB as part of a new building out there by Campus Point. Base rent would stay the same at $1,396. They are tenants in good standing. They submit, the federal government pays us on time so far, so they're tenants in good standing, and we're happy to have them there. That completes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. Any questions? I have a couple. Did they choose the 3-year term, or did we offer a 3-year term?
Commissioner, they asked for a 3-year term.
Okay. And you said tenants in good standing, and I know those folks, of course they are. Does the government shutdown and startup have any effect with us getting paid?
That's also a good question. It hasn't as of yet.
Okay. All right. Well.
Now, as for their offices out at UCSB, I don't know.
Okay.
But we're getting our check.
All right. Any other questions or discussion? I believe we have a motion in front of us. If anybody would like to put it forth. So we have a first. Is there a second? Okay. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any nays? Any abstentions? Okay. It passes. Did you get all the detail? Okay. Item number 9.
Item 9, assignment of lease agreement number 25733, Mother Stearns Candy Company, located on Stearns Wharf. Recommendation that Harbor Commission review and recommend City Council approve the assignment of lease agreement number 25733 from Neil and Judy Bruskin doing business as Mother Stearns Candy Company, to JBC Investment Holdings 1 LLC for the 392 square foot retail store located at 219B Stearns Wharf.
Thank you. Mr. Bossy again?
Good evening again. This is a proposed lease assignment, as Ms. Brzezinski just stated, for 393 square feet at 219B Stearns Wharf. Mr. and Mrs. Neil Bruskin purchased Mother Stearns Candy Company and assumed the lease through an assignment process back in 2006. The Bruskins have made numerous improvements to the retail space, and their gross sales have increased considerably. They've done an amazing job out there, and we're very appreciative for all of their efforts. The most recent lease was entered into in December of 2016 and expires in the end of November in 2021, and that's the initial 5-year term, and they have an optional 5-year after that. So as is customary with lease assignments, which don't occur too often, the lease terms would remain the same. So again, 5 years with one 5-year option to extend. They currently have a little under 4 years remaining on that original term. The base rent is almost $2,400 per month, or 10% of gross receipts. They're typically above that. They do quite well out there. And of course, similar to all our other tenants, they have a cost of living increase based on the consumer price index, if applicable. The primary specialty of Mother Stearns Candy is, as you could imagine, is the store carrying candy and popcorn. They have a secondary specialty as well, and they may also use the premises for the sale of film, tobacco, that's with the exception of electronic cigarettes or vapor products, gift items associated with candy and tobacco, as well as various snack foods. A few months ago, the existing owners, Mr. and Mrs. Bruskin, came to us and requested an assignment. Again, as is customary with these, there are no change to the existing terms. The proposed owners are Mr. and Mrs. James Carr. They are local Santa Barbara residents. They have a considerable amount of business experience. Mr. Carr is a certified public accountant, and he's been in various businesses for the past 40 years. He's also owned 5 different convenience stores. Mrs. Carr is also very experienced, and she, for a time, I believe for over 10 years, was the manager of over 140 Greyhound convenience stores at various Greyhound depots. So you can imagine the amount of effort that took. I can only imagine. So we've gone through our process of assignment with the Carrs, and they have a great credit rating. They're ready to do an outstanding job and continue the success that the Bruskins have had at Mother Stearns Candy. And they are both Mr. Bruskin and Mr. and Mrs. Carr are here in support of the lease assignment. So we're happy to have them here, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Well, the S&E appears to be highly qualified, and according to my grandchildren, there's no way this business could ever fail anyway. So I would make a motion to recommend approval of the assignment.
Any other questions? I also see Mr. Bruskin, did you want to speak? Not necessary? Not necessary. Very good. Thank you. Okay. All right. Any other thoughts? We have is that a motion? Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a first and a second. Okay. All in favor, please say aye. 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 Any nays? Any abstentions? Okay. We're good there. Congratulations. Mr. Reedman, staff communications, commission staff communications.
Chair Spicer, nothing from staff this evening.
Okay. Anything from the commission? Appears not. I would ask if we are ready for adjournment. Perhaps you could pass. There's a first. Is there a second? Sure. Very good. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Aye.